Hello everyone, and welcome to the Season 9 finale in Abu Dhabi. So, as usual, we are going to jump straight into qualifying, and this is my first out lap, and it's always very interesting exiting the pits here in Abu Dhabi. Very interesting with the tunnel. So, up in front are a couple of drivers who are also on their out laps, and there's a little bit of misunderstanding here with Skilly. Nothing too serious, but as he let Gems through, I was sort of expecting him to stay over to the left. Obviously, he's weaving to get heat into his tyres, so he chopped over to the right hand side. I just had to hit the brake slightly and pull over to the left to avoid colliding into him. Again, as I said, nothing big, just get on with my qualifying. And here we are on our first flying lap of the final race of Season 9 and the final race of my first competitive league racing season in any sim racing game. So as you can imagine, this was feeling quite special for me, and I very much was wanting to do the absolute best that I could do, not only in this qualifying session but also hopefully in the race. But continuing to focus on qualifying, I think this banker lap that I'm setting here is probably the best banker lap that I've set so far this season. Typically I have a hard time nailing the lap in the first go. I'm terrible in one-shot quality, as you can imagine. I always need several laps to get into the rhythm and to nail every corner. But this one was actually quite decent. I didn't have any real major mistakes. Now unfortunately here towards the end of the lap I do have some traffic in front of me. Unfortunately I just end up catching lamb oil in this very tricky final section of the lap, where it's quite difficult to get off the racing line and let someone else behind through. But thankfully I wasn't completely blocked. There's just a bit of dirt here, I didn't lose my head or anything, and I was able to set a very competitive time of a 1 minute 22.8. Now, as I have done with previous quality sessions, I've put enough fuel in the car for a push-cool-push, and on my second push lap, unfortunately someone knocked away the 50-meter board for turn 5. So because of that I ended up braking way too early and lost all my time because of that. I was still able to find a bit more time. I was going to improve by around half a tenth, but then unfortunately here into the hotel section I ended up going a little bit too wide and invalidated that lap. But even after that I lost all that improvement, so I might not have even improved at all. Even if I did improve, it would have been by very, very small margins. Now this is my third flying lap on a second set of soft tyres. I was improving by a very small amount again in those first two sectors. I didn't really feel like I nailed them. I was still struggling with turn 5. But then unfortunately I invalidated the lap a corner earlier this time. So I bail into the pit lane. I have enough time to put another set of soft tyres and do a push-cool-push, which certainly isn't the most optimal. Now on this one I'm already a little bit compromised because I messed up turn 1, so now I'm down on my delta, but thankfully into turn 5 I break a better point this time. It's still a little bit too early, but it's not enough that I lose a huge amount of time. So here running over the blue paint because that causes you to lose less speed when bottoming out. Into the chicane, slight rear locking, but we are able to get a really good exit this time around out of that chicane, again running over the blue paint. 2 tenths up on our time into turn 9. Commit to the maximum. We've gone a little bit too deep and we have quite a big swapper on the exit as well. We are still a tenth and a half up on our previous time. We're going to be pushing flat out through this final sector. So far looking good. We are still gaining time on our first banker lap. Remember that banker lap had dirt here in this sector. So we are definitely finding time here into the final turn. Going 3 tenths up on our previous time. and we slot into second place ahead of Mini Jonas. Now this here will be my true final flying lap. Into turn 1 I'm able to nail the first turn. We are going a 10th up on our previous time, but then now turn 3 just completely bottled, get too tight on the inside, get a bit too greedy, we go over track limits and invalidate that lap. I decided to continue pushing just to see what sort of lap time I could do, but then I brake way too early for turn 5, again caught out by the lack of marker boards. Thankfully we were still able to finish qualifying in P2. So strategy-wise, I'm planning on doing a one-stop mediums to hards, planning to go up to lap 12 on the mediums, then switch over to the hard tyres. So let's go to the race start. So that's the end of the first lap, and while it was a fairly straightforward start for me and France up in front, behind it was all kicking off as Mima Jonas gets a relatively poor start and loses a position to OA Glitch behind. And then in the back there's a McLaren that ends up making contact with both Ferraris and spins out in front of the second Ferrari, causing some carnage further down the field. Otherwise, up in front, Mini Jonas makes a dive down the inside of OA Glitch, makes it stick. So this is another view on the start. As you can see there, Mini Jonas getting a bit of wheel spin and losing out on the position to OA Glitch. And there in the background you can see the McLaren spinning out. And then I collect this bollard and send it flying across the track. Goodbye bollard. And then here, Mini Jonas makes his move. Neat move down the inside. I get a bit of wheel spin on the exit of turn 5. But now let's return back to the present. We are on lap 2, picking up straight where we left off. We are going to continue this fight for P1 with France. So we get a good run out of turn 5. We are going to overtake France here before the chicane, which isn't always the best option. Ideally you want to overtake after the chicane, because otherwise you have the potential to do this. So here I go deep into the chicane, which gives me a terrible run out of the chicane. France is already alongside here, and he's going to have DRS. And here I'm burning my battery. I do not want to let Mini Jonas pass as well, so into turn 9 I'm going to brake as late as I can, nearly going to the back of France. I think I had a very different racing line through this turn compared to the others. I very much aggressively attacked the first apex of turn 9, and I'd go a little bit wider, down the throttle, and take a wider line with more speed. So here's a different angle of that. As you can see there, committing a bit too late on the brakes there, going a bit too deep. Obviously there's dirty air, that sends me wider as well. But I am able to hold the second position ahead of Mini Jonas, and now onto lap 3 I will have a second bite at the cherry There I effect an attack to the inside. France goes slightly deep himself. Now here I didn't get the best exit. I was a bit too hesitant on the throttle. It was very easy to get excessive wheel spin out of that chicane, so I was being overcautious there. But that doesn't matter. We are able to move to the inside, brake late, and get in front of France. That's going to compromise his exit out of turn 9, and he's actually going to have Maluma Jonas show his nose up the inside here into this right-hander. As we enter the hotel section, I'm trying to push as hard as I can. This is the golden opportunity for me to try and break DRS to the cars behind. So we are continuing on now from the beginning of lap 4, and as you can see I have been able to break DRS to France behind. Unfortunately, Maluma Jonas is going to be able to overtake France here, and with the aid of DRS he's going to close up enough to be back within DRS range. So unfortunately that didn't quite work out. As you can see, the Maluma Jonas is actually already quite close to us. I've burnt quite a bit of my battery, so now I'm going to have to recharge my battery again. And basically at this point, I am now stuck with Maluma Jonas and France right behind me. So after this, I'm going to skip to lap 10. Every lap up to that point, I had been defending against Maluma Jonas, having to burn my battery on the 2 DRS straights, and just staying ahead by a few tenths each time. Now here into turn 5 I made a bit of a mistake, ended up braking too late, running a bit deep into that turn, which allows Maluma Jonas to have a run on me into the chicane. Now of course Maluma Jonas doesn't want to overtake me before the chicane, because then he'll be left without DRS. So he hangs back a bit here into the chicane. I was also holding myself back, hoping that he would overtake me. When I saw that he wasn't going to overtake me, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead, try and get as good of an exit as I can. I might lose this position to Maluma Jonas, but I just need to try and keep France behind here. But instead, I take the car out for a spin, literally. Now thankfully I only lost one position because of that. We are going to be side by side here with Lam Royal out of turn 9. But we are able to thankfully hold him behind for now. Now the major problem caused by that spin is that I now have massively increased tyre wear, especially on the rear right tyre, which was the limiting tyre. Alright, so let's take a look at this incident again. Obviously here at the beginning of lap 10, I'm in first place, Maluma Jonas in second, France in third. Duano Avico is behind in the Williams in 4th place, and then a bit behind him is Lam Royal in the Haas. So here into turn 5, I end up making a mistake here. I brake too far to the right here on this curb. If you brake too much on this curb, it will cause you to lock up your front right tire. And that's exactly what happened to me here. It sent me deep. If you look at Maluma Jonas behind, it's way too deep, and I also get a very compromised exit because of that. Now this is where I make quite a big mistake. At this point, I should immediately set my battery to recharging, not burn any of it, and basically force Maluma Jonas to pass me here on this first DRS straight. France is just about far enough behind that he won't be too big of a threat, but I don't do that. I still burn too much of my battery. So because of that, we are going to enter this corner side by side. And of course, Maluma Jonas is not going to overcommit to this corner. He's going to try and hang back, because if he overtakes me after being side by side through this chicane, he's basically going to give himself a compromised exit, and he's not going to have any DRS. And you have to remember, in this race, Maluma Jonas was in a title fight with France. So because of that, Maluma Jonas is going to do everything he can to ensure that France does not overtake him. So because of that, he's going to hang back, make sure I'm the one who loses the DRS, overtake me, and prevent France from overtaking him as well. So here I also try to hang back in this chicane, but then I very quickly realized that William Jonas was not going to overtake me here. So I had to now try and push on in this corner and get as good of an exit as I could, and just hope that I had enough battery and enough straight line speed to hold France behind. Now I did not get the best exit, I got a bit too much wheel spin, and that put me under a huge amount of pressure here from France behind. So into turn 9, as you can see here, France is showing his nose on the right side here of my car. I was aware that he was there, and I did not want to brake too early for this corner, because if I brake too early, that will allow France to run side by side with me here, and depending on what line William Jonas took in front, that could end up seriously compromising me with the dirty air and everything, and that will allow France to just easily overtake me around the outside. I braked a little bit earlier here to try and not run into the back of William Jonas, but it still ended up being too late. I found out after the race that William Jonas was running significantly lower wing levels than what I was running. So because of that, he was naturally braking earlier into turn 9. However, I wasn't really aware of this at this time. So although I braked earlier and I also turned in earlier, I didn't compensate enough for his line. So because William Jonas turned in earlier and braked sooner than I was expecting to, I wasn't able to react in time, and that sent me into the back of William Jonas. Now, because of the way the crash happened, he did not feel any effects from it, and I was the only one who really had any negative effects from it. Thankfully, I didn't get any damage from it, and there you can see Don Ravico passing me there. Now this is Lamoille behind as he drives up alongside us. He's on the hard tires at this stage, so he does have a slight tire advantage, and I am able to hold him behind for now. So just to recap, unfortunately that crash was entirely my fault there, because we're running slightly different setups, and because I was especially taking a different line through turn 9. I had a tendency to brake significantly later for turn 9, miss the first apex slightly, go a little bit deeper into the corner, and that was my line. But for William Jonas and France, it was the exact opposite. They brake a little bit earlier, turn in earlier, hit their first apex, and keep it tight throughout the corner. So let's get back to the main race. So at this point, I am planning on pushing for 2 extra laps before pitting. You can see here in turn 1 the damage done to my tyres as I get a tremendous amount of understeer, and I get a track limits warning for that. Here into turn 5, Lamoille is going to throw it up the inside. I let him through and get a switch back. He will have DRS down to the chicane because the DRS detection point is before turn 5. But despite that, I was still able to get a bit of a run on him. I maybe used a bit too much of my battery there, but it does mean that now out of the chicane, Lamoille isn't going to have much ERS himself to deploy. So because of that, I am able to quite easily take back the position before turn 9. So next lap, Lamoille is going to dive up the inside again into turn 5, but this time he's going to commit a little bit less into this overtake, which means you're going to run side by side on the exit of the corner, and that gives me a slightly worse run onto this first DRS straight. But even though we did not get the best of exits out of that chicane, we were still able to easily fly past before turn 9.
4 stop today, 1 stop left this strategy.
So now at this stage I've got quite an interesting race ahead of me. Because of that spin on Manuma Jonas's car, I now am further back in the field than I really should be looking at pace alone. So now I'm going to have to overtake some slower cars up in front and try and fight my way back to a podium position. And although I was initially able to pull a second ahead of Lam Royal, he was still close enough to give us a bit of a nudge into the chicane there. Obviously I was braking a bit too early there on the fresh tyres, but of course Lam Royal behind is on mediums, so he also has slightly more grip at this stage of the race. Otherwise, the axle tap in and of itself was barely anything. No reason to be upset about that. And the next lap, Lam Royal is going to do a very good move down the inside into the chicane. But once again, I'm able to set him up on the exit out of the chicane. And with DRS, once again, we are able to pull alongside into turn 9, but this time it's going to be far more of a fight. Going around the outside, Lam Royal giving me just about enough room there. Some good hard fighting between the two of us. And thankfully into the hotel section I was able to complete the move. And still the duel continues. This time, lap 15, turn 5, I brake way too early, get half my car on the inside curve, and in that stage I've screwed myself over. This is now going to allow Lam Royal to absolutely fly past us in towards the chicane again. And at this stage, I'm really just trying to push hard to catch up to the cars in front, specifically OA Gunner. But this non-stop fighting with Lam Royal has slowed us up quite a lot. And again, on the exit of the chicane, I'm going to get Lam Royal before turn 9. I do think, after looking at this fight that's been going on for quite some time, that I was running a significantly lower downforce and less draggy setup compared to Lam Royal, because I was just flying past him on the straights, even whilst recharging my battery. Thankfully, at this stage of the race, I have now finally closed to within a second of OA Gunner, and that is going to give me a much needed break. But this position is still not going to come very easily, as I fake a dive to the inside which sends OA Gunner deep into the chicane. However, I do get a bit of a compromised exit here. I wasn't being quite aggressive enough on the throttle there, and I was in too low of a gear. But despite that, we are still able to get past OA Gunner before turn 9. Lam Royal is going to be stuck behind OA Gunner for the rest of this lap, so that is going to allow me to break out of DRS range of the cars behind. And on to the very next lap, we are going to be in a position to overtake OA Glitch in pretty much the exact same spot out of the chicane. However, we end up getting a significantly better exit here, which means we end up running our nose on the back of OA Glitch's car for quite some time before I finally pull over to the side. and finally get the move done. Lap 18, and we have now caught up to Boogeyman in front, but he will pit this lap, so he'll get out of the way. Now my race from this point on is going to be with Don Rabico for a reason I will discuss a little bit later. So jumping ahead to lap 24, I just want to draw your attention to the leaderboard up in the top left. Currently, as I said before, my fight is with Don Rabico. That's because he had a 10-second penalty before he went into the pits. Now, sometimes the game gives you a 10-second penalty for complete nonsense, so I wasn't entirely sure if this 10-second penalty was going to be removed post-race, which means that they effectively take 10 seconds off your finishing time. So I wanted to make sure I finished at least 10 seconds ahead of Don Rabico in case that ended up happening. So although I'm in a bit of no man's land currently, I am still pushing as hard as I can because I don't want to let that gap close anymore. And now on lap 27 with 2 more laps to go, I end up having this moment into turn 9. I get slightly hooked onto the outside curve, which causes a slight moment of oversteer as I turn the car into the corner. Otherwise it didn't really seem to cost me much time at all. However, this coming up right here unfortunately did cost me time, as I'm having quite a few moments of oversteer in the hotel section, which carries me a bit too wide, causes me to cross over the white line on the exit of the corner, and that gives me a 3-second penalty for track limits. And that brings us to the end of the Grand Prix. William Jonas will win the race for Racing Bulls and tie for the championship lead with France. And we are able to cross the line in 3rd place, 17 seconds ahead of Don Rabico. So for certain, mistakes were made during this race, but some of those mistakes made for a more interesting Grand Prix on my side. So overall, I was actually quite happy with the race. Obviously that spin was not ideal, but it did cause me to have a more interesting race after that, having to make up positions. Otherwise, I was feeling very positive after that race. And I'm literally looking forward to racing next season, in Season 10 of LSA. As always, here are the results, and I will catch you next time. Goodbye.